South Korea is truly bro, it is crazy. First off, I have to say that the overall vibe of Korea is very tense, very similar to how it is in the US. In Korea, people are super obsessed with celebrities and consumerism, and it almost feels like they're using these things to try to cover up the void that they have inside. They feel like something is missing in the society. Korean society is extremely superficial, and it seems like Korea is a first world country with a third world mentality. I personally felt that Korea was just a more expensive, slightly better infrastructure version of Vietnam. And the reason for that is because Korea and Vietnam were both products of the war between like the communists and Americans, right? The only difference is that the Americans invested a lot more capital into Korea, which is why they're more technologically advanced.
I saw a comment somewhere that said that Korea has technology from 50 years from now, but it has a societal mindset of 50 years behind. And I think that is a perfect way to describe it. But I feel like because of their history, they haven't really had time to develop themselves an identity in who they are as Koreans yet. So they're kind of stuck in this world between Japan, China, and the US, and they're trying to latch on to whatever they think is cool from all of these places. The problem with a lot of these war-torn countries is that when you strip a lot of the societal values that were there before, but don't have anything really to replace it afterwards, the society kind of falls into chaos and they're lost trying to figure out what they value.
Ethnicity solves coordination problems historically. When you break down those coordination systems too fast and don't replace them with anything else, you get societal breakdown. So you can have
chaos.
Very malfunctioning societies. You know, go to Japan versus go to any Western city, and you can see the difference between a culture that's working and a culture that's not.
In a lot of ways, this country does feel lost culturally. Like they don't know what they stand for, they don't know what they want. So that's why they latch on to trends everywhere in the world, or that's why they had this huge obsession with the West, with Europe or with the US, because they themselves kind of lack a cultural identity. Another thing that surprised me is how American this place feels. The infrastructure is definitely similar to America in a lot of ways, where everything's very spread out, and then you have residential areas, you have areas for the mall. It takes a lot of commuting to get in between everything. And there's a lot of like American restaurants. Look, a Mexican food on the border right here. I was walking around and I saw on the other side of the mall there's like CPK too, and that was one of my favorite restaurants back in California. Korea has this weird obsession with the West and Europe. And a lot of these malls, especially the higher end ones, are designed in a way where it feels like I'm back in Europe. It feels a little dystopian in a lot of ways, especially with the music playing in the background. It feels very Squid Game-esque.
Yes, there's not a lot of crime. People won't steal from you on the street like they will in Latin America. There's not a lot of violent crime either. People were saying that Koreans are a lot more direct, and I think that is kind of true, but direct to the point of they're just having poor manners. People don't really trust each other, and people are actually very, very rude. Polish people are direct, but once you get them to open up a little bit, and if you just observe the general society, people are generally smiling, and Polish people are actually very polite and very nice. I was on the airplane, I was trying to go to the bathroom. Granted, it was during the meal, so we had like the food stuff on in front of us, right? But then we had an extra chair in between us that was free, so we could have easily moved it. So I asked this Korean guy who's sitting on the aisle, hey, do you mind if I use the restroom? And he just looked at me and say, where do you expect me to go? It's funny because there was a girl that was sitting like on the other side of the seat who saw the whole thing happen. Her neighbor asked her to use the restroom, and she was taller and everything, and she just got up and then let the guy pass because it's like the normal thing to do, right? But this is a good example of how I've noticed a lot of Koreans interact while you're in Korea. They have this overall attitude where they try to bully other people by kind of trying to make you think that you're stupid, if that makes sense. And I think the moms do that to the kids, the men do that to the women, everybody kind of does it to each other. So it leads to this environment of extreme like tenseness because nobody's trying to make a mistake because you'll be heavily called out for it.
It's a very cutthroat society. That's why it reminds me of the US in many ways, because they put so much effort here onto their media, the music, and the TV shows, and it gives this impression of what Korea is supposed to be like. That's why a lot of people want to come here and visit, particularly women. I feel like a lot of Korean media really caters towards the female gaze, but if you come to this country, you realize that people here are very cutthroat. It's a very dog-eat-dog world, and it's a society of haves and have-nots. Because in a more developed society, there's more care for your neighbor, more care for the general rules of society, having manners and treating people well in the street. But I feel like people here are honestly quite rude, tight with their friends and their close immediate family, because it's almost like a low trust society in a lot of ways. And because the language is also quite aggressive, I've found a lot of people like arguing on the street. That's a really weird dynamic.
So on my last trip to Korea, I had a situation where having an eSIM literally saved my butt. I arrived to Seoul Station from Busan at around 12:30 a.m. This was a big mistake because the metro is closed after midnight. When all these people come out from the trains, trying to get a taxi is near impossible. For some reason, my regular SIM card that has roaming decided not to work, but I didn't really panic because all I did was go on my Saily app, bought a plan for 1 gigabyte, which is extremely cheap, and it worked instantly. That's why I'm so excited to talk about Saily, an eSIM application from NordVPN. Having an eSIM is great because you don't have to replace your current SIM card, nor do you have to pay exorbitant roaming fees. I saw Verizon was charging like $200 a month just so you can have roaming. That is crazy to me. So how do you use Saily? First, buy a plan for the country that you're going to be visiting. Make sure you install the eSIM on your phone and you set data to that SIM card. And when you land into your new country, you should get access immediately. It's that simple. You can get 15% off by using code WHERE at checkout. Download the Saily app or go to saily.com/where to try it out for yourself. Thank you so much to Saily for partnering with me on this video. The people that I really feel bad for are the Korean women. I think Korean society in general has a lot of pressure put on them, but Korean women specifically have so many expectations put on them to provide for the family, to cook, also work, and to keep everything super organized.
In my family, this is a really interesting observation. My dad is getting older now, and you can tell that he's aging. He really fulfilled his job as a dad. He provided for us financially. He looks super old and raggedy, but my mom looks super young and youthful. She's still in her feminine energy. Where here, the men are the ones that are youthful and young looking and look really nice, and the women are the ones that look super run down and overworked. Kind of a backward society in a lot of ways. So I heavily respect the Korean women here because they live a hard life.
And when I was looking around, I noticed that there were so many old people everywhere, a very concerning amount of old people. People into their 60s, 70s, retirement age, they're still out there working in restaurants and trying to sell stuff on the street because they have no family to take care of them. Maybe the society is set up in a way where there's no safety net for everybody. Everybody pretty much has to fight for themselves. Japanese people do have a ruthlessness about them, but I think that the overall society, rules and structure-wise, works extremely well. And because Japan has had a very long time to develop their history and their culture, they were isolationists for a very long time. They have these values that have been around for thousands of years. Whereas Korea, because they were in the middle of a bunch of different empires, they were ruled by the Chinese for a while, then they were ruled by the Japanese, and now they have a very strong connection with the US after the war.
The food here though is undeniably great. Korean food has always been one of my favorites in the world, and coming here has only reminded me of why I love the food so much. It's so diverse. History is incredibly deep with their food. All the bachan, all the little side dishes that you get are so complex. I kind of feel bad for the old ladies running these restaurants because they look so worked to the bone. A lot of the young generation, they don't really work in the restaurants or a lot of these hard manual jobs. Those jobs are mainly taken by the older generation. So I wonder what's going to happen over the next few years. It almost seems like a lot of the old Korean culture is going to be lost when it comes to food because the younger generation doesn't seem to be taking up that mantle. Comparing back to Vietnam, Vietnam has a very similar diet to here where they don't have a lot of meat. Meat is very expensive. So a lot of their food is based on just like soups, on rice noodles, on a lot of vegetables. But Vietnam is incredibly skinny. It's the least obese country in the world. But here it's kind of the opposite. There's a lot more fat people than I thought that I would see. I wonder what the reason is for that. If it's the quality of the food, if it's the lifestyle. It could be genetics, but I think mainly it's because of the diet, because it's very hard to get access to high quality protein here. Meat's very expensive, and here in Seoul, seafood is also very expensive. So most of the people are just filling themselves with a lot of carbs, a lot of the vegetables like kimchi, grocery store food, because those are the only things that are affordable.
That's why they have so many different forms of bachan, which are delicious for sure, but they're not really filling. So I found myself that I was eating like 4 times a day in Korea because I was not getting enough nutrients from the food. It was just vegetables, rice, soup, and a little bit of meat. The lack of protein was very noticeable. And if you want to do like Korean barbecue or any of those things, you're going to be paying a premium price for it. There's no opportunities for the young people. I'm noticing that the young people study extremely hard, but can't really buy a house, especially in Seoul. Everything's so expensive. The wage that they're getting is barely a livable wage. So all these things combined, it makes sense why they're not having kids, because it's super hard to afford them. I saw somewhere that the government just voted to increase the amount that the young people pay to fund the the pensions of the old people. It's no wonder that the youth is so fed up with the government, with the country. Nobody has any kids anymore because it's so difficult for the youth to survive. You're super stressed out just trying to provide for yourself, and you can't buy a house. So it seems like the overall mentality of the youth is to be like, the world is not going to be there for us anyway, so F it. We're just gonna do whatever we want.
A way that you can tell if a country is like first world or third world in mentality is how much focus they have on beauty. Beauty is valued in every society for sure, but here in Korea, there's like a hyper obsession with, and in my opinion, cultures that are closer to like the baseline survival level, they put a lot more emphasis on beauty, because if you're a beautiful person, your life can change overnight without having to do that much work.
For better or for worse, Korea is a very looks-based society, and unfortunately, based on how good you look and how beautiful you are, that determines the opportunities that you have. So if you walk around in the restaurants and a lot of the retail stores, you're gonna notice that there's a lot of good-looking people everywhere, almost to the point where it seems like you can only be hired if you're good-looking. That can explain a lot of the pressure that the people feel when it comes to looking their best. If that directly affects the financial opportunities that you have, no wonder people are gonna put a lot of effort into it.
One thing I do have to admit though, is that the foreigners here stand out a lot, in a good way. When foreigners adopt Korean beauty standards, they look so good, especially like the Slavic women and a lot of the black women too. When they do their skincare and they put their hair up and they wear the Korean fashion, they look so good. I even noticed that here in Seoul, there's a lot of like really feminine looking men here, and I think this place attracts those kind of men because this is one of the places in the world where if you are a man and you want to dress feminine, or maybe you're on the gay side, it's a lot more societally acceptable because a lot of the other men, Korean men, they also look that way. I also found the beauty standards here to be very unrealistic, and you see a lot of Korean media. You think that all the men look like supermodels and then all the women look like a specific way, like dolls, but the reality is very different.
It's a very collectivist culture, kind of in a bad way. People are just so obsessed with the latest trend, what everybody else thinks. There's no originality, and it's a very hype-based culture. People only like things because it's popular to other people. There's a lot of really bad clothes in Korea, to be honest. They have a lot of very cheap options, which you can get for cheaper in Vietnam for the same quality, in my opinion. But then they have some like higher tier brands that are super expensive, and these are the ones that everybody goes for. So if you're trying to find like good clothes in Korea, expect to be paying like $150, $200. I found this jacket at the store called Pottery, which I think the store is excellent actually. For example, I went to this store called Muninsa, which is kind of their version of H&M. It's very expensive for very low quality stuff. You put on the things and they look nice. Like the style is correct, but the material looks cheap. Just the way that it sits on your body, just the way that everything fits. And that was just like indicative of a lot of Korea's things that they were selling.
This is kind of a depressing video, and I don't mean it to be. I don't think Korean people are bad. There is a lot of heaviness to this culture and this country. It's gonna be really interesting to see how this country bounces back over the next few years, because I only see like a negative downwards trend because Korea has so many problems that they have to fix over the next few years. I don't know how the young population is going to handle it. Yeah, Korea was not what I expected at all. I highly recommend that you guys watch this video next. Share your thoughts down below, and I will see you on the next one. Peace.